Hello, and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm B.C. Cloutier, President of Action for Life, and this is Father Michael Orsi.
Bang.
Hello, Father.
Hey, my man.
Father, today I thought we would talk about the differences between conservatives and progressives. That'll make for a nice, calm conversation. Let me start with a Bible quote from Isaiah 19, verse 2. I shall stir up Egypt against Egypt. They will fight one another, brother against brother, friend against friend, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. Sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Let me just point out 3 points. Make 3 points. Different views about individuals and communities. A conservative would ask, what can I do for myself, my family, my community, and my fellow citizens? While a progressive would ask, what is unfair? What am I owed? What has offended me today? And what must my country do for me? Diversity. Diversity and choice. Progressives say that different ethnicities and gender identities are welcomed, but a variety of opinions and ideas are not. Conservatives say people should have choices. Progressives, on the other hand, say one political solution should fit all. And the third point I'd like to make, the different views on we the people. If we the people pass laws that progressives disapprove of, they turn to judges, executive orders, and government bureaucrats behind closed doors to overturn the will of the voters. Conservatives, on the other hand, believe in individual rights, not special rights. Conservatives believe in allowing Texas to be Texas and Vermont to be Vermont. And conservatives believe that the people can vote with our feet and we can live where we are comfortable with the laws that are passed in that state.
That's a mouthful, BC.
I think that pretty much sums up where we are today. And it's interesting, we all have friends who are conservative or progressive, liberal. But overall, in America, we're roughly half and half.
Yeah, I would say so. Let me first try to define what I think a conservative is, okay? A conservative is someone that, first of all, believes in capitalism, right? Believes in capitalism. Someone who believes in a republican form of government, and someone that believes in the Bible. I think that's a good way to describe a conservative. Now, with those principles, what we're talking about is someone who is, how can I say this, self-possessed. They enjoy a personal sense of freedom. They want to be free, and they want to be able to operate in a civil society that enables them to be free, enables them to use the gifts and talents that God has given to them, and a society that respects them for who they are. Capitalism has helped to enrich many people.
Sure.
Okay? Like Ronald Reagan said, a high tide, all boats rise, something like that. And that's what a conservative believes in. But it's something that the conservative believes that I kind of have to do it myself. I can't wait for somebody else to do it for me. And unfortunately, we live in a society today where a lot of people expect that somebody else is going to do it for them. Usually, it's the case is government. You get this term progressive. I don't like the term because it's like a euphemism. It has a very positive connotation. And I don't think it's positive at all. It's kind of a regression because it takes responsibility off of me. The conservative says, it's my responsibility. I do it myself, all right? I got to pull myself up by my own bootstraps. Progressive or regressive says, somebody else has to do it for me, and if they do not do it for me, they are prejudiced against me.
Right. Well, that's really where we stand today.
Yeah. So I think that the dichotomy is between a conservative, and I think that a progressive mentality ends up in socialism. That's the logical progression. A conservative is going to say, well, I have to work for what I want. The socialist is going to say, well, let a lot of other people work for me. I don't have to work that hard because I can rely on the government to give it to me. And so it's that whole idea of, tax the rich. Tax the rich.
Right.
Well, what happens when you run out of rich people to be taxed? I mean, if you take all their money away from them. So the conservative says, hey, look, in certain parameters, we have to, abide by the laws. We got to watch out for monopolies. We have to be sure that people are not being abused by big business. Crypto capitalism or crony capitalism, that's what it's called, folks. And that has to be controlled, too. Crony capitalism, where the freedom is taken away from individual people and supported by big government. Right? But the bottom line is that in a fair society, that's the whole thing. It has to be fair. Society has to be fair. It goes all the way back to the Constitution. What powers are given to the federal government? And they were limited. Those powers were very limited. They've grown exponentially over the years. But the powers were for what? Powers were for the infrastructure, roads, all right? Roads, in those days, roads.
Roads and railroads.
Yeah, roads and railroads. And certainly international relations, treaties with foreign countries. You can't have every state making their own treaties. And also to provide safety for people, because you can't have a society if people are not safe. You can't have business, you can't have commerce without safety. So let's just go back to the horrors of a couple of summers ago where they were rioting. A place like Seattle, say. Mm-hmm. Seattle had tremendous rioting.
Yep.
And shops were being looted. And the police were unable to control what was going on. Folks, a lot of that is the result of socialism, socialism, progressive ideology, that we're all entitled to somebody else's property. And it was a tremendous breakdown then. Tremendous breakdown in society, and your businesses ended up closing. You can't live that way. And then what happens? Then there's no place to go to shop anymore.
Right.
You can't get those things that you need. So just like the communist countries, once the communists took over, socialism took over, there's no more private initiative, there's no more incentive, there's no more private business. And if you have ever gone to a communist country, I have in the past, even the shelves of the stores were empty. There were lines just out for bread. And the government controlled everything. So, when you have this pie in the sky, well, we'll just take all the money from rich people because it's not right that they should have more than I do. And they're a bunch of thieves anyway. Well, maybe some of them are. That's why you have government to intervene certain times where you say, hey, wait a minute, now that's not fair. You have your laws against corporate corruption, all that stuff. But for the most part, what you're going to say is, the more freedom that we have, what a conservative says, there has to be freedom. And it also has to be as much law as necessary and as much freedom as possible.
I look at the tech titans, Jeff Bezos, Sergey Brin and Larry Page with Google. These are avowed progressives who have made a fortune in capitalism and conduct themselves in what is a very monopolistic behavior. Mm-hmm. How can they be progressives?
Well, they're not progressives, okay? They are people who want to control society. That's what they want to do. But that's what socialism does. It controls society.
Right.
It takes away individual freedom and individual initiative and puts structures around people where they are unable to be free, unable to create wealth. So if you have your Bezos and your what's his name, Bill Gates and all that crowd, what do you have then is people who are trying to control the population. So they become the elites, and this is a part of what we call the New World Order and the World Economic Forum, where you have these elites that they do want to control society, and they do it under the guise of we're doing good things for society, right. But they tell us what the good things are. They control everything, and they use sometimes different excuses like. We are concerned about the environment. And so they put in some very, very strict environmental laws. We're concerned about global warming. And so they have people in different places conforming to keeping the planet cool. They are elites. They are not, certainly they're not conservatives. And it's people like that have tremendous amount of power. They really are a shadow government. I consider them a shadow government.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. We'll be back right after this. Hi, BC Cloutier here. We've got some exciting news for you. On October 19th, at the Naples Grand Beach Resort, Action for Life presents Jim Caviezel live and in person.
Why are you doing it? Because God's children are not for sale.
The star of Sound of Freedom will be here in Naples, telling us all about the filming of the movie and the real-life experiences of Special Agent Tim Ballard.
Hear that? That's the sound of freedom.
Please join us for a lovely evening with dinner and beverages at the Naples Grand Beach Resort on Thursday, October 19th, beginning at 5:30 p.m. Get tickets at actionforlife.org/events. Father, we're talking about progressives. They're really liberals, but they like to call themselves progressives versus conservatives. Even the labels. Conservatives have been conservative forever. Progressives didn't like the liberal label, so they changed it to progressives.
Yeah, I think, though, BC, there's been somewhat of a change in our idea of what they used to be called liberals, but some truly were liberals. They were, the members of the Democrat Party. John Kennedy, he might have been considered, Democrats might have been considered more liberal, but I think that we've moved from liberal to socialist in a lot of people's understanding of what's going on and how society is structured and what government should do.
Well, Kennedy's famous words, right?
Yeah.
Ask not what government can do for you, but what for you can do for your country.
Right. Yeah. It's a whole different understanding. As a matter of fact, if you have someone like John F. Kennedy, if he came back today, I think he'd be mortified to see how far to the left that his party has gone. If he'd be part of that party anymore, I don't know.
He might be a centrist Republican
it might be.
In today's day and age.
Yes. Yeah.
So, we were talking about Klaus Schwab.
Oh, yeah, a little while ago. Folks, when you were sleeping during the break, we were talking about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum.
Klaus, Gates, I guess Warren Buffett probably fits in that.
Yeah.
And so these elites, I think, have formed a cable, and they're now getting the very powerful, in many countries, CEOs, people of high power, high positions, to buy into their vision, which is very socialistic.
Yes. When they meet at Davos, they gather, the high-powered people from all over the world, and they give them their vision of the new world order. So you're going to have even the social credit system to see if certain organizations, somebody comes to the meeting, they learn this, what does it mean to have social credit? What does it mean to be inclusive? What does it mean to be diverse? What does it mean to be aware of governmental policy? How do you instantiate that into your organization? So you begin to say, well, we have to have diversity, we have to have inclusion, we have to have equity. How do we do this? And they bring these ideas back from Davos, and they begin to integrate them into their organization. And then, of course, there's the social credit rating, and organizations are rated as to whether or not they are fulfilling these rules of DEI.
Not to be confused with ESG.
ESG, yeah.
There's a lot of pushback on this, as you well know, and there are some conservative groups that are filing lawsuits in the courts based on the court's view of affirmative action at colleges. They are, I just read about this in the Wall Street Journal, they're trying to extend that to companies. And now all of a sudden companies are running away from diversity because they're afraid that they will face liability for their actions.
Right.
I wouldn't want to be a big company CEO these days because now it sounds like you're going to get it from both sides.
Yeah, yeah.
But they brought a lot of this on themselves.
They certainly have. I'll tell you, one of the funniest things, I don't know if it's funny or sad, folks. I mean, you decide. But I heard that they were also talking about equity in sentencing people who have committed crimes. So if you are a certain color, then you should get less of a punishment than somebody else who is of another color, or vice versa. So, this whole idea, even equity in punishment for crimes, you see how bizarre this gets.
Well, it could get more bizarre. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I was thinking the other day about rather than have 12 jurors, we could have 12 artificial intelligence units that would hear all of the testimony in a courtroom and come up with a decision. It's an interesting concept. Of course, what we all know, I think, about computers is what's called GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out. And that's what we're discovering about artificial intelligence, is that if the algorithms are not written properly. So, sorry.
Let's just go on a little bit from there. Even when it comes to sentencing somebody, we were just talking about that. Does the computer tell you what the sentence should be when you've put in all of the variables? Yeah. So,
well, that would be interesting, I think. It probably statistically would be fairer than the way some people are sentenced today, although we allegedly solved that problem with the sentencing guidelines that the judges are supposed to use. But
yeah, I'm even worried about sentencing guidelines. I think it takes a lot of the human element out of it.
Absolutely.
That a judge is bound to do certain things.
Well, we call them judges, and then we say, but you can't judge.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'd rather have, the judge. Of course, there are great judges and some not so great, but for the most part, I'd like to have a judge have a little more discretion in the courtroom because the judges, they're getting a feel for the case, getting a feel for the person, getting some information, maybe as to the person making some kind of a change of heart while in jail. There's a famous story. Jacques Fesch, his name is Jacques Fesch. A young man committed a murder in France back in, I think it was 1950s, and he was sentenced to death. And while in prison, he had a tremendous conversion experience. And the beautiful, beautiful letters that he wrote to his mother while in prison about his life with Christ. And he was executed, but his case is now up for canonization.
Really?
How do you like that?
Wow.
So, if I were a judge and this guy came in and I said, well, he seems to have had a change of heart. Instead of executing him, could we give him life in prison? I think that's what I would like to see.
I don't disagree.
Okay.
I don't know that we'll get there because judges have become so political these days.
I know, isn't it sad?
We could talk about Wisconsin, where there was an enormous amount of money from outside Wisconsin that just got a progressive Supreme Court justice elected. And they didn't waste any time in, first of all, they neutered the Chief Justice because he's a conservative.
Right. Now, don't get me wrong, folks. There's always been, a problem. You might have a crooked judge to say, the judge was bought off.
Right.
But for the most part, I'd like to see judges have a little bit more leeway in cases, especially when it comes to capital punishment.
We'll be back right after this. Hi, BC Cloutier here. We've got some exciting news for you. On October 19th, at the Naples Grand Beach Resort, Action for Life presents Jim Caviezel live and in person.
Why are you doing it? Because God's children are not for sale.
The star of Sound of Freedom will be here in Naples, telling us all about the filming of the movie and the real-life experiences of Special Agent Tim Ballard.
Hear that? That's the sound of freedom.
Please join us for a lovely evening with dinner and beverages at the Naples Grand Beach Resort on Thursday, October 19th, beginning at 5:30 p.m. Get tickets at actionforlife.org/events. Welcome back to A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm BC Cloutier. Father, before the break, we were talking about capital punishment, and I wanted to relate just a quick story to you. I had occasion many years ago to have breakfast with Governor Mario Cuomo when he was governor of New York, and we began to talk about the death penalty, and the governor was publicly against it, and I asked him why, and he said in so many words that he thought that life imprisonment was a much greater punishment than the death penalty, and that he believed the death penalty let the criminal off too easily. It's an interesting concept.
It is, but I'd like to know why so many times that those who are condemned to death fight so hard not to go to the death chamber. Anyway, let's talk about that. There were always four principles that we referred to when it came to the death penalty in moral theology, moral philosophy. One was that it took the criminal off the street. It took the dangerous person out of circulation. And I remember a number of years ago, there was a debate between Mayor Koch of New York and some lawyer in Chicago. Mayor Koch was for the death penalty. The lawyer was against the death penalty. And Mayor Koch said, let me tell you something. We had this notorious murderer in jail, and he got life imprisonment. And while he was in jail, he killed another prisoner. Now, let me tell you this. If he had gotten the electric chair, he would not have killed anybody in prison. Okay. So you take somebody dangerous, off the streets. Somebody will say, well, you can really contain these people now. You put them in a high security prison. But we also know of people who've escaped from prison. The other thing was it was a warning to somebody else. Don't do this, or this is going to happen to you. And we talked in one of the programs about the Romans, how they crucified people, not just to punish a criminal, but to say, hey, there's a warning here. Don't you do this, it's going to happen to you.
Right.
Then there's the whole idea of rehabilitation. Now, a lot of people make this mistake, and they say rehabilitation means you're going to send somebody, you have the term penitentiary, and that way you could reform them, and they could come out, and they could be better citizens. But rehabilitation meant that you were rehabilitating the person for God. Remember what they would say at the end of a sentencing to somebody who was going to be executed, and may God have mercy on your soul. All right. So the idea was that this person is going to make penance and make their confession to God and own up to their sins and beg God's mercy while they're in prison waiting execution, and then they would be executed and ready to meet God. If you remember the movie Angels with Dirty Faces, they always would have a chaplain going to the death chamber with the person who was going to be executed. Yep. And the idea was that person was getting ready to meet God. That was the whole idea of rehabilitation. As a matter of fact, the bomber, the Oklahoma bomber, McVeigh,
Oh, yeah.
before he went to the death chamber, he was asked by a priest if he wanted to go to confession and receive communion, and he did. So that's real rehabilitation. Okay? The last one is retribution, and retribution means that you are paying back to society what you have taken from society. You've taken the life of an innocent person, and it's called balancing the scales of justice. These were always the four principles that moral theology or moral philosophy based itself on when it came to trying to understand capital punishment. Now, capital punishment is up to a society. You can decide you don't want it, and that's fair enough. You don't want it. You might say, no, this is not a good thing. Or a society could say, we do want capital punishment. So in certain states, you don't have it. In certain states, you do have capital punishment. The church has spoken out against capital punishment. I don't think it's intrinsically wrong, but I think that we at least have to listen and say, is this a good thing to do at this time? Now, recently, a case here in Florida, the Margaret Stoneham Douglas School, where the murderer who murdered all of those innocent people was given life imprisonment because one person on the jury said no to capital punishment. And the law was then changed. Instead of having 12 jurors, all you need is 8 jurors. Now, folks, I don't like tampering with the laws. It's a unanimous jury for a certain reason, and that is to make sure that you get a good and just judgment. You don't tinker around with the numbers just to get somebody executed and to make it look like you're tough on crime. Sorry about that, Governor. I disagree with you on that one. Right? The other thing is somebody wanted to bring up the cases where, suppose it's a rape of a child. Could somebody be executed for that? And once again, I have grave concerns about that. Although it's heinous, horrendous, monstrous, it's a terrible thing. The case came up, I think, a number of years ago. I think it was in Alabama, where a child rapist was going to be put to death. And the Supreme Court came out and said, you have to have equity. It has to be a life for a life. So you just can't decide to execute somebody because they committed a rape. How horrendous it is, no doubt about it. Is it worthy of the death penalty? I don't think so on that one either. So, I'm going to say that we have to weigh this thing very, very carefully. Recent popes have spoken out against it, and we take those opinions seriously. But I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with it, if society deems it something that is going to be workable and good for society.
Thank you for joining us, and please join us again next week, same place, same time, for a conversation with Father Orsi. Until next week, thank you for joining us, and God bless.